think you've met Mr. Michael Japao from Liberty Life. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. And His Excellency, once again, thank you so much. But somebody you might not have met is Mayor Zandile Ellen Shabalala, who's the Deputy Chairperson of the Zambia South Africa Business Council. Okay, so let's talk about financial services. We had a little bit of a conversation when we had your panel earlier on, but we want to talk about it in general now and the regulatory issues surrounding it. What is the state of affairs in terms of the financial services environment in Zambia?
First of all, let me say that our financial sector is maybe categorized in about 4 or so institutions. And we have the banks, obviously. We have the insurance industry. We have the micro lending part, which is some of them are now deposit taking, others are not. And of course the banks and the micro lending is regulated by the central bank, and the central bank regulation is clear there. The insurance sector is regulated by the Pensions and Insurance Authority, which is also a government department falling under the Ministry of Finance. What I can say generally is that, like most countries right now, the regulation is fairly up to speed, to the extent that I'm aware that regulators are having a lot of interaction amongst themselves, especially in the region, SADC region. Recently in Zambia, we had an insurance conference in Livingstone in the month of June, and I do recall regulators coming from South Africa, Kenya, and Zimbabwe, Botswana, Namibia. So you could actually see that we have regulation that is really up to speed, and best practices are shared amongst the regulators. So speaking from the insurance sector that I am more experienced about, we are fairly regulated well, and I think the insurance regulator would like to see a more uptake of the business by the public, and so they're so much moving away. And I think this is the same understanding you get when you speak to colleagues in the central bank. They are moving away from the policing aspect to an aspect of driving the business, opening the doors so that the players of the industry can find space in order to operate, and not to be a policeman that really impedes the development of the business. So there's a fair appreciation of regulation in the financial sector, and I think that the players are getting a fair support from all the regulators.
All right, Your Excellency, what opportunities are there for people thinking about this financial services environment sector? Zambia is best known, as we've been talking about, mining, about agriculture, tourism mostly, and perhaps we've been banking for years, but financial services has evolved quite a bit. Are we ready for that? Is there opportunities for us to exploit?
Yeah, I think the old paradigm that government will develop alone all sectors is gone. The participation of the private sector is very key, and the financial sector is no different. Like we stated earlier, Zambia's financial and banking sector is really quite grown. We heard earlier that we have 19 commercial banks, among them multilateral ones. We have insurance and other benefits institutions that are doing very well. So it's not a nascent, it's not a small sector to say. It's one of the fastest growing sectors. But I wanted to say, and I think the reason we are here at Zandile is that we probably should take those questions that could have fallen through the cracks as we begin to wind up the day and answer and assure whoever wants to invest in Zambia that we are open for business. I was just looking at the current statistics that have been released by the African Development Bank, AFDB, and they are positioning Ivory Coast and Tanzania as the fastest growing countries, economies in 2016, and they are all agro-based. And when you look at Zambia, like I stated earlier, we have the best climate, we have the best soils. Why can't we be number one in the agriculture sector? The reason we are not among probably the 2-3 this year in 2016 is because we depend on the mining sector, which has suffered a knock as you've followed on global trends. The mining sector or all mineral-based economies suffered a knock. But if you have a diversified economy, you will use them as cushions. If one sector is not doing well, in this case, for example, mining, if we had a well-developed agriculture sector, would have fallen on it and would not have felt the impact and the job losses we suffered. If our tourism sector is fully developed, and we have some of the rarest species in the world, only found in Zambia, in cases like bird species, we simply need to exploit what we already have. And all this can be done without the financial sector. We need to carry along ourselves to support it, and I'm glad that the previous panelists from IDC and TBSA are already investing in many sectors supporting the economy. So thank you for that.
All right, wonderful. Mayor Ellen, working with partners between Zambia and South Africa, you have, I suppose, an insight as to what South African businesses should be seizing in terms of opportunities. What are you seeing as a South African business perspective looking into Zambia? Zambia has been selling their story very well, but from a South African perspective, what are you seeing that perhaps we're taking for granted as opportunities?
Thank you for the opportunity. So much has been said about the innovative ways we can use in the country. And of course, I'm saying this in light of what experiences have we encountered in South Africa with the whole development of the BBBE councils and the experiences that we shared during those times, especially in the financial services, which I must be very honest, it's less transformed in our country. But what are we taking to Zambia as our lessons? Is that, yes, Zambia is a highly religious community, but I must caution, Honorable Minister, business is not religious. If you don't put monitoring mechanisms like what our chair mentioned in the sense of codes of good practice, and you make sure that there are stringent measures to monitor progress with a deep yardstick to check whether how much have we achieved in this financial year and the coming financial year in terms of empowerment of your local communities, it might not happen. But my observation as well, Peter, is that the area I've not really interrogated in terms of understanding the Zambian community is the capacity to innovate. Because there's a growing perception in our country that to participate in the economy, you have to be a BEE of someone. You have to fit into Anglo, you have to look for partnership with the big gurus and so on, which has been partly beneficial in our case, but partly a bit disastrous. We do have a CSIR, which is our innovation hub here. However, I personally have issues about where it reports to, because it's supposed to create industries, but it reports to another innovation hub, which is science and technology. So it's those lessons where we have to find a way of making sure that the lower leg of our community base also has a way of empowering themselves without going through the whole structural, cumbersome processes, but they can use their innovation to cultivate their businesses. So in South Africa, we also learned that though we do have an innovation hub, which is CSIR. We've got good IPs. We've developed very good scientific areas. We don't have that cascading down to ordinary business people, even if they have innovation. They don't have small areas where they can go and either prototype or get in a mode of reporting what they're doing, which could be scientific and be economically beneficial. Coming back to the financial services, Peter, I happened to be working for the bank for 10 years. There has been so much transformation. However, I do believe that the developmental financial institutions that came as a result of enhancing the small businesses did not really do what they're supposed to do in terms of simplifying the entry level for small business. So when you go to the DFI, you find that you experience the same cumbersome application processes as if you are going to the bigger commercial bank. So there's got to be a way to simplify the entry level. And I know the lady in the morning, Mrs. Melu, gave us some kind of insight in terms of what they are doing, which is extremely good. But there's got to be a way to simplify the entry level for lower small business participants. Thank you.
Okay. One thing that I've been thinking about, and earlier on we did speak about this regional story and this 200 million people around the area, but in real terms, if I'm in Zambia, is there a market of people that can make my business sustainable? Do we have enough people for me to do business in Zambia?
Yeah, thank you. There is a good market. Talking about the financial sector, I just need to say that we have a huge informal sector that is waiting to be explored. And innovation is needed to be able to explore that opportunity. Speaking from the banking side, you will find that a lot of the informal sector is unbanked. Speaking from the insurance sector, we have actually been speaking in the industry as industry players to try and come up with micro type of insurances that reach out to the lower end of the market and see how we can provide affordable products and be able to provide those products in a manner that the informal sector will appreciate. And those are the challenges that are really an opportunity. So yes, there is a lot of market. Yes, the market is begging for investors that will come and be able to exploit that opportunity. The SMEs market is another market from the financial sector that is not being enhanced. And listening to her, yes, we have a lot of banks in the country now. We have a lot of multinational banks and some tier 2 type of banks. But clearly you can see that very few vehicles have been created, even in the financial sector, to assist SMEs. So when you say, do we have a market for this product? The market is there, and it just needs to be exploited, and it needs to be enhanced. There is need for innovation that creates vehicles that will bring this begging opportunity to fruition.
I'm going to ask some questions that will appear random, but I think just to touch on some of these issues because we didn't get a chance to earlier on. Adapting to the culture, is that going to be a challenge? You've lived in South Africa a long time now, so you know us. Will we survive Zambia?
Yeah, I think one of the issues we talked about is tolerance. You know, someone sat in Europe and designed a map, and we became what we've become, 54 nations. But if you look at those nations, we are actually nations within nations. In Zambia, we have 73 tribes. They have their own culture, language, and identity. So it's actually a miracle that you literally have one Zambia, one nation out of 73 nations. It demonstrates to you the level of coexistence and tolerance of our people. And the political leadership, especially President Edgar Lungu, has reignited what was started by Dr. Kaunda, who made Zambians not identify themselves by their tribe, but by being Zambian first and being who you are, whether you are Kaonde, you are Bemba, you are Lozi, are secondary. And languages were promoted, and English is our official language and is taught in all schools, but that didn't mean that we relegated our local languages so that we do not lose our culture. So yes, you assimilate properly. Zambians, they say, are the best English speakers. They are sought for as interpreters or to translate. So they are well assimilated like any British colony, but as a people, they are one Zambia, one nation, out of 73 nations.
Wonderful. Mayor Ellen, and again, maybe this is from your own experience, what you've seen or conversations that you've had with your partners in the chamber. So we know they're great people, but are they productive? Because I want to have staff that are going to work hard if I set up a factory in Zambia.
That's a very simple question. I must echo the same sentiment with the ambassador. There is so much common amongst ourselves, between us and Zambians. And the trading culture is just general trading culture as you would find in South Africa. And I'm sure with the help of a minister who has been working here and is adapted to this culture in Zambia, he must be finding it very easy to operate there. But people there are very, very nice, I must be honest. With the area where I really see the pace that is a bit slow is on the empowerment of women as businesses, as high echelons in the corporate ladder. But there is a political will that exists.
Okay, and then work culture in government. I've had experiences in a country south of yours, north of ours, I won't say which one, where I get to a government building, lunch is at 1 o'clock. I get there 12:59 and they say come back at 2.
Generally, any leader, especially Honorable Mulusa, will tell you that we all battle with the civil service because a civil servant never loses his job. It's politicians like Honorable Mulusa who lose their jobs, or people like myself. Presidents who come and go, the civil servants have been there forever. So there is this culture sometimes that promotes laziness and a laissez-faire attitude to serious work. So our duty as leaders is to emphasize that we reignite the civil service that work with us. They work at the pace that is required. There's usually a joke that the civil servant, if lunch is at 13, they leave at 11. And when they're supposed to come back at 2, they come back at 3 just to get the jacket they left at the back of the chair and go home because the salary will come anyway. So there are mechanisms that we are implementing in Zambia that are performance-based, that you hold your job because you've performed. The private sector have been very good at this level. In fact, His Excellency the President has made it even to ministers. He says your positions will be performance-based. So you can imagine how we are relating to productivity in relation to what we wish to achieve. We need to change a culture, just like here in South Africa or any other African country. We have a habit, coming from a socialist state where because someone pushes you, you want to threaten a strike or you want that boss removed, But this is a culture we have to fight and change. Because if I tell you that you have to work 8 hours, you better work for 8 hours because I'm going to pay you for 8 hours. But you work 3 hours, but demand for a payment of 10 hours. So we need to change the culture. And I think from the political leadership, we are pushing that we come against this spirit of laziness and
Okay.
bureaucracy.
I would just say something about the informal sector. Like I said, it presents a huge opportunity in the financial services, and I'm aware that both the banks, the insurance companies, and insurance brokers are doing what they can to come up with the strategies and products that can mitigate that kind of situation. Obviously, we speaking with the spirit of owning up where things are not okay, and being honest. The financial sector has been struggling in the past with debt repayments, and that's an issue that has been grappling with the sector, both in the insurance and in the banking sector, where people borrow and repayment tends to be a challenge. So that's where the informal sector tends to be a problem, because financial institutions half the time are faced with how best to mitigate. Once you want to venture into that sector, but what is it that you can do to mitigate non-repayment of premiums, non-repayment of loans, and so on. Besides that, I would like to say that the financial sector is well developed, quite frankly, because I think we have a lot of international banks there. So the same practices that Barclays, that Stanbic Bank, that many Standard Chartered Bank, for example, Zanaco, have in South Africa and the other parts of the world, they also bring along home. So insurance companies, we have Sanlam, we have Liberty, we have a lot of other multinational companies. Just now, a couple of months ago, we have had one of the UK-based insurance companies, very well-respected company, opening up in country. That is Prudential Life. So, honestly speaking, without having to just, as they say, beat our own drum, the financial sector is well developed. Of course, a lot more can still be done. Thank you.
I think most of the questions really need to be answered by Zambia per se. But I do think that there are a lot of lessons to draw from South African experiences in terms of access to finance, especially for small businesses, and in terms of what is deemed risky business, that when they look at a small business, they see it as risk. So slowly, I think Zambia will definitely master the entry level of small businesses. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'll take a few questions, but to summon my minister, because most of the issues are policy related or at his level. So we are glad that you'll be here to answer that on behalf of government. There was a question on jurisdiction risk. What happens to a company that is here in South Africa and has established in Zambia? I think there is no jurisdiction risk whatsoever. I know Zambia, like South Africa, has a similar Commonwealth jurisprudence, and although South Africa is a hybrid, taking authorities from either the Dutch, Commonwealth, and others, so there is no difference. And there are companies, for example, like ShopRite and game stores that have been in Zambia since 1994. You can learn some lessons from there. And remember, one of the reasons we set up the Zambia South Africa Business Council is that the business entities that have established themselves in Zambia, their shareholders and senior managers and directors remain in South Africa. So we thought that it would be more productive, we can achieve more by engaging the owners of the business in Zambia that are based here. Financial services, I think Mr. Njapau has handled those matters, and as a sectoral expert, he's handled them very well. On carbon credits, yeah, we hear there are a lot of millions or billions, even through the United Nations, to take advantage of carbon credits. We are also attempting to exploit these opportunities that are there. I'll leave the question of domestic resources the collection of efficient revenue, the questions from Barclays and domestic capital to the minister, I think he will adequately answer those. But what I can tell you is that the last 5 years, our national budget, up to 80 to 90% arises from domestic revenue. So we are no longer foreign dependent. So it is important and imperative that we enhance the efficient revenue collection systems. But the minister will expand on that. Kennedy spoke about the informal sector and social entrepreneurship. Again, Mr. Njapau alluded to that issue, and Zandile, because a small or medium enterprise is deemed as a risk institution. Their business is risky, and it ought to be a mindset through policy and through institutions like ourselves to say, look at it the other way. They are not risky. It's you who's being risk averse. Allow them to flourish. They might not have the capital or security that you want, but that's why you exist. So these financial institutions have to change, adapt, and recognize the economies they work in. They are not in Japan. They are in Africa. They are in Zambia. And they need to recognize the production that comes from the informal sector. Brazil, India, developed from supporting small and medium enterprises. So if you are looking at them as risky, then we will not develop. You have to look at them as partners. My brother Cuthbert, had to give him immunity for his questions. He says there has been policy instability, and the minister will answer that. I don't think there's been policy instability. What is at stake is just national development. I'll give you a very clear but sensitive example. Someone walked into my office and says, I've been studying the kind of mines you have. And for example, the new mines you've opened in Northwestern Province, why do you call them copper mines? Because you have up to 5 to 21% gold production from those mines. Are you calling them copper mines so that the gold is not recognized, therefore you don't get value from it? So you see that there are these mining giants running the mines, and you make policy decision. Maybe you are in an election year, and they say we can lay off 5,000 people, and it can affect your stay in office. So I don't think there was policy instability. It was tact, it was strategic. The president has now been elected for the next 5 years. Probably you will see government very firm and very steady on all decisions that it makes. I will invite Honorable Minister Lakinusa to answer the rest. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I hope I'll remember and be able to cover everything that was asked. I think the question regarding carbon credits has already been tackled by the High Commissioner. In fact, Zambia is accessing quite a lot of money from carbon credits. But I didn't get the question clearly. There was linkage of why South Africa can't use those carbon credits into Zambia. I didn't get that one clearly, but we can chat about it on our way out. There were also some concerns regarding attitude towards work by Zambians. Peter asked, am I going to find hard workers, dedicated workers, and that kind of stuff? You see, like my sister here said, religion is religion and business is business. We cannot expect that people will behave properly by just being nice, or because you're asking them to be nice. You have to put systems in place which will hold them accountable. And unfortunately, in Zambia, we've been very, very slow as a government in terms of implementing tools such as performance management systems. There's no performance management system currently. We are rolling it out, but we haven't yet finished. And so you'd find that people do not have key performance areas defined for them beyond what is stated in the appointment letter. When you employ a proper performance management system, you have key performance areas outlined, key performance indicators, and timelines, and beyond that, there's reward as well as sanctions for non-performance. So you'd find that there's absolutely no way anyone would not report for work at 8 if they have so many things that they need to achieve over a given period of time. And especially if you've got a strict follow-up program to make sure that you hold people accountable. You reward those that perform and punish those that don't. We don't yet have that system, and that's why it's very possible to go to an office and you find somebody who should have been in the office at 8, only reports for work at 11, stays for 1 hour, disappears for lunch, and only comes back to collect his jacket. And after 20 years, we give them huge long-term service bonus for having done nothing at all. Domestic capital market, yes, it's highly underdeveloped. It's highly underdeveloped. And the High Commissioner here spoke about the ownership of big businesses being premised here and only having branches there. It restricts innovation and ability to make quick decisions by the executives who are up there. So our financial sector is still, I can call it, it's still immature. Its depth of reach is very, very shallow. Like I said in the morning, you might have a very, very good business case and you try to get a loan, no one will listen to you unless you've got collateral, which is at least 4 times the amount of money that banks are willing to give you. So our financial sector has got quite a lot of development to go. On our part as government, we need to assist that by accounting for all our citizens, more or less like you have here. You've got your ID book, and ID book is linked to a lot of things that you do. And when you mess up somewhere, you fail to access something elsewhere. Whereas when you don't account for your people properly, you'd find that people would mess up in one town, just change towns, go elsewhere and mess up again, and there's no way to account for them. But I must report that the credit bureaus are now there in Zambia, and we're able to list people and account for people's activities, but we still have a long way to go. In terms of policy formulation and implementation, let me admit that yes, there's been some shortcomings there. We make very good decisions, and at times we do not follow them up. In fact, when I took over, when I occupied this position, I received a CATE score from the World Bank, and the World Bank told me that there were about 11 opportunities worth $1 billion, which Zambia was not accessing, simply because the civil servants cannot simply make an application for those funds, or simply answer a questionnaire, which is a requirement before the processes to access those funds are done. And one of the facilities was being lost within 2 days. And within a day, we managed to renew it, and it had gone begging for 6 months. So some of these things are occurrences that are coming out of lack of modern application of modern management system. Luckily enough, we've seen quite some good migration of excellent people from the private sector into government as ministers, as civil servants, and these people are beginning to bring with them some of the best practices in the private sector. So there's a light at the end of the tunnel. Coming to domestic revenue collections, we have a long way to go there. There's quite a lot of potential for us to broaden our tax base. I'll give you an example. I think our tax collections as a percentage of our GDP sits at about 19%, whereas in efficient economies such as Norway, the ratio is 60%. So you can imagine we've got about a 40% headroom to reach the efficiencies of Norway. Like the High Commissioner said here, we graduated into a lower medium income country, and that meant that we no longer qualify for certain budgetary support from multilateral organizations. And so we are funding our budget to the extent of 90%, with 10% coming out of borrowings, and the little budgetary support that would receive from protocols such as climate change initiatives, where we have to be given money to do projects involved in both adaptation and mitigation of climate change. Policy instability, this I'll tell you, the business community will always find a way to dodge paying taxes or to be accountable. There's a case right now, I won't mention names, but when we meet, I will let you know. Here is an investor where the Zambian government owns 20% of that entire investment. The investor moved $2.5 billion out of Zambia and gave it to another sister company which is in the lending business. Then the same company faced some financial crisis. That company came to South Africa and borrowed $300 million and paid out about $36 million in arrangement fees and that kind of stuff. So when you look at the whole transaction, number one, the government lost its share, its 20% share of that $2.5 billion. And number two, the government had to pay a share of the cost of borrowing that $300 million US. So then what would the government do? If we have a repetition of such cases, we would introduce a law that would be meant at curbing that activity. Now what would happen is that the same business community would turn around and mouth Zambia in the investment community. You know, they don't know what they're doing, they don't know where they're coming from or where they're going, they've done ABCD, and they'll sponsor a few rogue professors to write a few papers condemning Zambia, and Bloomberg would pick it. And when you go borrowing, the investor community will lock in that risk premium based on the falsehoods that have been generated by the same people who are doing wrong things. So before we condemn government about policy inconsistencies, we need to go further and look at what informed this policy position. Sometimes you can't even see where the business community is being punished, but the way they will fight that policy will show you that there's something they're hiding. I mean, even in homes, we don't just wake up and tell our wives that no more kitchen parties. But I once did that with my friend David Nalumango, who sat there, and his wife Ruth. We were having a drink in 1998 somewhere, and Jordan Kana, he was here. He stormed into the room where we were and said, "Can you imagine? At the kitchen party, they've hired a stripper, and the women are saying he's a very good-looking man." You understand? So we came up with a policy to say no more kitchen parties. So policy formulation is always induced by some undesirable activities. Thank you very much. What I'll do is I'll hang around a bit here and then hang around in the bar in the Michelangelo. For those that want a one-on-one where they couldn't have an opportunity here, so I'll be in the Michelangelo. I'll share with you the cost of tots of whiskey so that you come prepared. Thank you very much.